I am a spirit medium. Some people say psychic medium, but it's, psychic and spirit work hand in hand. My work for many years is about helping people, about healing wounds of grief and trauma, and helping people within their own path in life, as well as the mediumistic side to it, connecting with spirit.
Perfect. So yeah, many people often conflate psychic and medium as meaning the same thing. So what briefly is the difference between, although they're certainly connected, what is the difference between a psychic reading, for example, and a mediumship reading?
A psychic reading would be about the person's life, the person that's connecting with you. So if someone comes to me and they're looking for psychic, basically what they're going to get is me linking with their soul, their spirit, see what's on their path, what's been in their life, past, present, and the potential for things to come, of things that they might need guidance on and things like that. And it can also include people within their family, people that are connected to them, or situations in life that are connected to them. So that's all psychic. And the difference is the medium at that moment in time is connecting directly with that person's spirit. Whereas mediumship is about connecting with those that are no longer here in the physical, those that have crossed over to the other side. And it's a completely different connection.
Perfect. And immediately when people say psychic and medium, people will immediately jump to, well, it's obviously a fraud. Have you had many who have come to you with that kind of cynicism mindset, and how has your experience been with those?
Yeah, for sure. And I always say to people, especially at events, people will come to events which are audience readings, if you like. So it's a demonstration of mediumship and everyone's involved. And you often get some skeptics coming along to that because they've maybe come along with friends or their partner, or, they don't really know what to think about it at that point. But I welcome that. I always say that I welcome that, because why wouldn't you be? Until someone can prove to you something that resonates with you, you can't just take someone's word for it. So I don't mind people that are skeptical about this kind of work. But you do also get people, and I have done in the past, people that have come for readings who want to be very guarded and want to make sure that, you're getting what you say you're getting, which again, you don't mind. As a medium, you expect that. But you also have to be a little bit open to the process and what's taking place. So, I can understand why people are skeptical, especially now. We have social media, it's out there much more, but unfortunately that brings a lot of misinformation as well. It brings a lot of fraud, so I can understand why people would be skeptical at times.
For sure. And have you had any of those such skeptics that have come maybe in an audience reading or a one-to-one who have gone away quite astounded with the results?
Lots, lots and lots. And when that happens, I do love it, because it makes me feel like that has opened someone else's mind up. It's not about what I did. It's not about, me being right about something. It's about actually knowing that has affected that person in a way that they're going to now ask questions. And when they ask their own questions, they're kind of then on a little bit of a soul journey of their own to find out what it is, what this is and what does it mean. And so for me, that brings me, joy that people at least have tried that. And likewise, if someone goes away, they've come in skeptical, if they go away skeptical from any medium, that's okay too. It's really something that is very personal. But from my own experience, usually people will walk away feeling differently than when they came in.
Which is always the goal, I suppose, at the end of the day for mediumship. So when did you first get into the subject? When did you first, I suppose, find out that you were more receptive to mediumship than say others? Because I know that the general perception is that we all have that ability, but some are just more sensitive than others. So what was your journey in this area, I suppose?
Well, I remember being 3 years old and seeing spirit people, and I didn't know I didn't call them spirit people, but I remember knowing that they were from the other place, as I would call it. So I kind of always feel like, as I look back on my childhood and growing up, that I always was aware there was somewhere else, there was another world, that we're not here, from nowhere. And I kind of just inherently had that knowledge. And then when I started to see spirit more and hear spirit, it made sense to me. It just felt natural to me. I'm not saying it felt natural to be a medium, because by the time that I realised that's what was happening, I would never have said to anyone at that point I was a medium. I was just like, oh yeah, you know, I feel them, I can hear them, but not feeling like this is my life's work and this will be my life's work. It wasn't until maybe late teens, early 20s that I had to go and kind of get to understand it and develop it, because I was hearing things and seeing people and, you know, getting messages for people, and it was becoming a little bit overwhelming for me. So then I decided to speak to another medium about it and develop it. Especially at that point as well, I still didn't expect for the medium to tell me that I'm a medium. I just expected them to say, well, we will help you with that. I didn't expect it to be something else. But when I actually sat for development and decided, right, I'm going to look at this, it all just fell into place. And I just felt like I was home, and everything had then suddenly made sense to me, why I was getting these feelings. And like you said, a lot of people think everyone can do this. And what I would say is everyone is psychic. There's a psychic ability within every single one of us, because we come from the spirit world. So we have that mind-to-mind communication within us. So that's your intuition. Some people say it's a hunch, a sixth sense. That's your psychic ability. And we can all develop that to certain degrees. Some people will develop it far more. Some people will just use it for their own intuition. But mediumship is different. Mediumship, I really do believe that you're born a medium. Like, there's a purpose behind that.
So as a child, you mentioned that you saw these spirits from, as you say, people from another world. Were you seeing like full apparitions at that time? And what were you seeing, I suppose? What did they look like, or what were the sensations you had?
Sometimes when I was really small, that's what I seen. I just seen people wandering about, just as I would see you. But as I grew older, it became more like small visions or parts of people. So what I mean by that is, maybe I would see a hand, or maybe I would see a bit of energy building up behind someone and just see someone's eyes, or, you know, just different parts. And mainly for me, the biggest thing that happened was hearing. It was the hearing that came first. It was the feeling of spirit, but the hearing, it was like I could hear 1,000 different voices all speaking at one time, almost like tuning a radio in and different frequencies crossing over. And that's really what spurred me on to find out more about it, because that was quite, not frightening, but quite overwhelming at that point. And it was always at night time it happened. So when I would go to bed at night and close my eyes, then I would get all these voices speaking, and I didn't know who they were, and I couldn't even make out really what they were saying at that point. It was just that I could hear them. And I always remember like waking up in the morning and feeling like, I don't know who I was speaking to last night, but I'd been busy. I was so tired and exhausted. So I kind of had to look into it all, just really from the voice perspective of it. But yeah, I mean, I can see spirit like I see you, and other times I see it in my mind's eye, and other times I can see flashes. It just really depends how they communicate.
So would you say you're currently, primordially is the wrong word, primarily clairaudient then, as opposed to clairvoyant?
Primarily, I would say clairsentient, which is the clear feeling, because I feel spirit first and foremost. Every medium has all the clairs, but some of them will stand out stronger than the others. So for me, clairsentient is my strongest point initially when I first make my connection, but then the clairaudience, the clairvoyance, the claircognizance, which is a clear knowing, just comes in. So they all kind of work in conjunction with one another.
And they're all very interesting, because they're all, from what I've heard from other mediums, very difficult to describe. So when you talk about, we'll start with clairaudience. When you hear spirits, you said that was something different, but you were saying that you heard them as if you were hearing other people. When you say that, because some mediums say that they hear them, as you said, you see them sometimes in the mind, as opposed to like a physical, someone standing there whispering into your ear. So how did you, or do you still hear mediums? Is it as if someone stood there talking to you, or is it inside
It's inside. So I call it your spirit ears. So I would say my spirit eyes can see things, my spirit ears can see things. And it's the easiest way for me to describe it to other people. So when I hear them talking to me, for instance, they could have a different accent, and I can hear their accent. I remember speaking to a lady, giving her a reading, and I had all the feelings of her mum, and I could see her mum, and I was describing everything, and she was understanding all. And then all of a sudden she spoke to me. And she spoke in Italian, and I don't speak Italian, but I knew it was Italian. And I said to the lady, oh, your mum's speaking Italian to me. And she said she was Italian. She didn't speak a word of English. So they can project that to you to let you hear their voice and let you hear what they're saying. So it kind of works in the mind, through the mind. The mind is a tool, but they are projecting their voice, or they are projecting their words.
So how does one differentiate between one's own kind of sporadic thoughts and because of course on occasion we do get the odd, you wonder, why did that just come up into my mind, why did I just hear that for no reason at all? So how does one differentiate between a genuine spirit communication versus just a wandering mind?
Yeah, I mean, that comes only with development. So when you first start out in your development mediumship, or you don't really know what your mediumship is at that point, your imagination will come into it, or your mind will magnify things at times. And because the mind is a tool, the mind is there to keep you safe. So basically, as a human being, your mind will tell you what you need to do, or your mind will give you instruction on, if you see a lion walking up the street, it's going to tell you to get out of the way to keep you safe. So your mind's going to give you things. So if you suddenly said, oh, I want to connect with that lady's mother, I wonder what her name is, the mind's going to throw in 10 names, because the mind's trying to give you an answer, right? So you can differentiate that between your mediumship when you know your mediumship. So when I link with spirit, I will know that definitely came from spirit, because it's a different feeling. It's not static, it's alive, it's moving energy. Whereas my own thoughts will be just like anyone's, they'll just wander in and out, and I'll say, oh, that's my own mind coming in. So it's more really to do with your own development and getting to know your mediumship. And I think for mediums, that's hugely important to know when you're working with spirit, when you're not working with spirit.
And is that similar with I always mix the terms clairvoyance, where you see, is it in the mind? Is that clairvoyance? Is that similar with clairvoyance, when you say you see something or someone in your mind's eye? Is it again just a case of learning over time to differentiate between mental imagery and I suppose as you say, you'd have the feeling with it as well.
It's the feeling, because really the clairvoyance is probably a bit of a tougher one to differentiate, because your mind will throw visions out, but it is really, for me anyway, it comes down to the feeling that goes with it. So I will feel if spirit are there, I will feel the presence of spirit. Sometimes you can get messages that come out of nowhere, they're quite random. You're maybe in the middle of your day and something comes in and you're like, I don't know where that came from. But when that happens like that, and there's no substance to it, there isn't a feeling of spirit with it, I will just put it to the side, and then if it comes back, it comes back. And sometimes it does, sometimes something will happen the following day and I'll be like, oh, that's what that was, in that sense. But more often than not, you're accompanied with the energy of spirit with it.
So have you ever had the argument, just to play devil's advocate, that many people have said, well, many people who have things such as very mild schizophrenia or whatever can experience these kinds of symptoms as well, for want of a better word, symptoms, you know what I mean? And they can seem very real and very, genuine. Have you ever had that? What if, have you checked for these kind of other things before? And I'm sure you have, absolutely. Because everybody does.
Yeah, absolutely. But even for yourself, even when it started happening for me, it didn't even take someone else to say it to me. I was questioning it. I was like, why am I hearing this? Like, is this an illness? Is this something that's happening to me? But because I had kind of grown up with the knowledge that there is a spirit world, and my grandmother was very good. She when I used to say to her, oh, there's a man in the kitchen, or I seen someone in the room last night, she used to say, oh, well, the dead don't harm you. So she made it very normal for me to experience those things. So because I had grown up with that a little bit, it made it easier for me to kind of accept that it wasn't an illness of some type. It wasn't something that was happening to me. It was, like I say, a different connection. It feels completely different.
So was your grandmother sensitive as well?
She was, and she never used it as in like she wasn't a professional medium. She didn't use her mediumship. I do recall when I was younger, she used to read tea leaves for people. I think a lot of women of a certain generation would do that in Scotland specifically, but she really did, and she was good at it. And I remember people coming to her door to ask if she would do it for them. So she always had that, but she didn't really venture into it too much. But her sister was a medium, a working medium. So that's my dad's aunt. And she worked in it for a long time. So it is in that side of the family.
So it does seem to be potentially a genetic component to being sensitive.
There's always a lineage for mediums. There's always someone else in the family. It could be 3 generations ago, but there is always a link within a family. If there's a medium in the family, there will be other mediums in the family. And even going forward, like my children, I have 2 boys and a girl, and they're all young adults now, but my 2 boys are very mediumistic. My daughter kind of gets things, but she doesn't want to know. She's kind of not frightened of it. She knows what I do, but she just doesn't want to know about it. Whereas the boys are very sensitive and really pick up spirit quite a lot.
Have you ever had trouble being a professional medium? Because again, as I say, I come at this from a very skeptical background, but one argument I hear a lot is that, money. They're taking advantage of people, vulnerable people in grief, to take advantage of making money from them. Have you ever had any clash with someone who's claimed that sort of thing? And what are your thoughts generally on that?
Absolutely, because when you first start out, when I discovered I was a medium and then it felt like, oh, this is what it's all been about, then you're kind of going into this is my work. And so what happened with me was I was working full time and I was doing my mediumship on weekends and the evenings and kind of just doing churches and gatherings and not taking payment for it, just out there working. And what happened was it flipped at some point where I was getting inundated for people wanting appointments and everything like that, and had to make a decision, what way do I go for this? And at that point I remember feeling like I don't know if I'm comfortable with this, because then you're taking money and it just gave it a different feeling. But what I came to terms with really quickly was that I have to put food on my table for my children. If I'm going to do this work, I have to be able to pay my bills. That's just the only way that I could do the work at that time. And so the spirit world really don't care about the money aspect to it. Now, I'm not saying people should rip people off or charge an arm and a leg for a reading. That's not what I mean. But really, it's your time that you're getting paid for, just as an electrician would, just as a counsellor would. Counsellors are seeing people that are vulnerable all the time, or therapists are seeing, but they have to get paid. They have to pay their bills. So it's much the same. And I know that the spirit world understand that. They don't even worry about it. It's not a thing that comes up. But I can understand why, because of fraudulent mediums who aren't providing a service that they should be, that the state that they're providing, and then they're taking money from people who are vulnerable, and not forgetting that the people that do come to you are in a vulnerable state in their life, whether it's through losing someone or whether it's their own life, they're a bit lost, they're looking for answers. So you have to take care of people, and that should always be the first port of call. And speaking for myself, there's many times that I'll do I do a lot of charity work. I see people that maybe don't have funds for a reading, but I'll go out and meet them and see them, because that's part of your work. It is part of giving back. So it depends on the medium, but for me, I don't have an issue with people charging for their time.
No, as you say, there are many internet support scams out there. It doesn't mean that all internet support companies are scammers.
Correct. Yeah.
But because it's mediumship, which is already seen to be impossible in modern society generally, then it's immediately all a fraud. It's the same. I've seen it a lot with near-death experiences. As soon as a near-death experiencer writes a book, they immediately become a fraud, despite past, professionalism and etc. I think a lot of it is down to the subject matter, because mediumship is generally not accepted, and due to its somewhat dodgy past and exposure, I suppose, for want of a better word, it's now kind of seen in a negative light immediately. Plus, of course, plus entertainment and
I
the way
was
it's
just
been,
going to
yeah,
say, yeah, the way
the
it's
way it's
been
been.
portrayed on TV
Mm,
and things. And if you watch any program on TV about psychics or mediums, they are always put in a negative light. They're always choosing people to feature that either they're not mediums, they're not psychics, they're in a bit of a delusional place themselves and think that that's what they're doing, or they believe that's what they're doing, and they don't have the evidence to back it up. And that's the ones that will be shown on TV. So, you know, then what the audience, that's what they're seeing. So they think, oh, that's just a load of nonsense or whatever. But if you go to see a genuine medium working, I actually wouldn't be able to understand that somebody couldn't see that that person was genuine if they're a genuine medium.
mm. And I've been to not many mediums, but I've been to several. I've been to a few who are very good. Carol Green, I don't know if you know of Carol Green, but she was very good. I gave her a fake name and a fake background and everything just because that's how I am. I make sure there's no possibility. And it was a really good, accurate reading. And I've also been to one woman, bless her, who was way off and very general. Did my mind immediately go to, well, she's a fraud? No, because maybe the connection was bad. Maybe, you know, there's so many different things, but people immediately jump to fraud, which is a shame. Maybe she was, I don't know. She didn't seem that way. So you've got to kind of read the person as well.
However, I would add in, if you can't give someone a reading, or it's general, or you feel like you're not getting the connection, a genuine medium will tell you that. So if someone came to me and that day in particular, I didn't feel the connection for that person, because you can't guarantee things as a medium. You don't know what's going to happen until you look at that. Now, what I will say is 99.9% of the time, it's going to be fine. But if there's a day that maybe you're not feeling well, or your energy is not good or whatever, and you can't quite make that connection, a genuine medium should always tell the person that, because I would know when I'm giving someone a reading if it's made sense or not. I'm going to know that. So then I would say, look, I don't think this is working today. Let's try again next week, or let's, come back. Or genuine mediums will do that. Whereas if there's a medium not providing a reading that made sense at all, should they really take the payment for that? I don't think so.
No, indeed. And I always struggle with and I understand the demand and everything like that with the more well-known mediums like John Edward or Teresa Caputo or whoever else. But I always am a bit concerned when I see readings being offered for $700. I understand the demand, but even so, that seems to me excessive. But again, I can't judge because I'm not in their boots. But to me, as a lay person, that would immediately raise red flags.
Yeah, and it is excessive, and it is a lot of money. And I know a couple of mediums over in the States that are celebrity mediums. They work in Hollywood and all the rest of it, and their prices are like over $1,000. And that's the world they live in, though. So the people that they're reading for are more than affording that. They're not really trying to appeal to the people that can't afford that because of where they are and what they're doing. Thank goodness that we're not all in that position, so that there's mediums all over the world that can help people of all levels or affordability.
And I suppose it depends why one goes to a medium. Does one go to a medium because they're looking for, from an emotional side, maybe they've lost someone recently and they're looking to connect and comfort themselves, which is fine. For me, I more go as a researcher because, well, certainly for comfort to some degree, because the idea of death terrifies me and I'm curious or I'm anxious to find out what is coming to happen, so I look at it more from a research, so I more value the evidential mediumship and the studies, etc. Whereas others may come purely for the emotional, which I think is good, but it can also become quite dangerous in a way, because when you're in an emotional state such as that, you're very likely to see things that aren't there, and then the question of morality then comes: is it right for someone to perform a mediumship reading for somebody, say maybe not knowing that it's not true, but but then if it provides the person comfort and belief, it's a bit of a moral quandary.
Yeah, and I think in that essence as well, a true medium won't do that. A true medium will only provide what's evidential and what they know to be true and what their connection is. And that, for me anyway, with readings, I feel that emotion has to come into it. But even if it's not necessarily about grief. It can be about the person's own life as well, and they will be emotional. So emotion has to come into it, but it's knowing that you don't play on emotion. You know, like I've watched mediums in the past, and the minute somebody sheds a tear because they've kind of got that connection for them, they go on and on and on about that, or they make a big deal about, oh, you know, I'm sorry I'm making you cry, but you know this, and I'm like, now come on, have some discernment with that, because really you're not trying to upset the person or keep them in that emotional state. You're trying to give them something that will give them the evidence but also help the healing process at the same time, you know.
As a medium yourself, obviously with your aim, as I'd imagine, for an evidential mediumship reading as much as you can over a kind of a comforting one, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you do both. I think both always has to come into it. But it's not about me sitting there tuning into the client's emotions and giving them that. It's more about me having to prove first that I've got that connection. It's like when you hear mediums saying, oh, I've got your father here, and he's saying that life's been tough for you, and he's saying that, you know, you just have to keep your chin up and move on. Well, there's no evidence in that whatsoever. They've not given evidence of the father. They've not verified the father. So it's, for me, it's always about proving first that this is your connection. You know, if I say I've got your dad, I'm going to have to give you evidence to back that up. You need to verify that for me, that that's true and correct and makes sense. Then we might go into the emotional side of things, because the father is obviously going to want to help the client, so you're going to pick up on those emotions as well. So I think it's a mixture of both, but I think the evidential mediumship has to come first.
Because then, of course, anything that follows that, the client then immediately has the knowledge that, or at least a strong belief that you're coming from a genuine place of connection.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I suppose that would then also provide, hopefully, a more of an open channel, if to use one of a better word, to allow more of readings to come through.
Yeah, trust has to be there. And I have had, like, I remember one lady coming in, and she immediately came into my room. She took her shoes off and she put her feet up on the couch, like sprawled out, and she kind of looked like, right, come on then. And so I gauge that, you know, and I know, okay, she's a bit guarded, that's okay. So her dad was there, and I brought him in, and she was kind of, yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure about that. No, that doesn't make sense. And it was kind of up and down like that for the first 10 minutes. And I said to her, do you know, I'm going to not do the reading today. Not because I don't feel that your father's here. I absolutely know that your father's here, but I don't know that you're receptive to it today. So we can either reschedule the reading, or just you have a refund and you don't have the reading. And she wasn't happy, and she said, well, you know, I wanted this reading. And I said, but not today. It's not going to happen today, because I had already gauged that it wasn't going to work. So what I said to her was, so I'll give you a refund, and I'll also give you 2 free tickets to my event next week. And she said, I don't want the tickets. She said, I don't need the tickets. And I said, that's okay. You can take them anyway. And if you want to come, if you want to give them to someone else, you can. But they're there, because I knew she really wants this, but she's just, for whatever reason, not really wanting to receive it. So anyway, she came along to the event. Her father came through, completely different information when he came through, told me he was a piano teacher and all of the information that he gave. And she was crying, she was emotional. And after it, she came up and she said, I'm so sorry, but I need to ask you, why did he not come through like that when I came to see you? And I said, because you weren't receptive to it. You were guarded. You know, it was like, game on, I'm going to see what goes on here. You weren't relaxed. So it just made it harder for the medium to work. But tonight you've came in, you've relaxed, you've had a glass of wine, and your father came in and gave you all the evidence you needed. And sometimes it can be like that. And as a medium, I've got to work through the person's energy as well as connecting with the spirit world as well. So it's not like picking a telephone up and just getting the information. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Indeed. It's kind of like trying to pour yourself a glass of water when your tap's clogged. It's not going to happen. Yeah, that's probably the worst analogy I've ever come up with, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
So what can you recall any particular reading that you found particularly impactful and evidential in terms of the information?
I mean, there's been many ones that jump into my mind, but one that comes to the forefront of my mind was again at an event, and I'd finished speaking to one lady, and I'd said, just as I pulled away from her and said, thank you very much for working with me, I said, oh, hang on, do you have a necklace with an angel wing on it? And she said, no. And I said, oh, okay, I just really felt I needed to talk about that. Well, the lady behind her put her hand up and said, I do. And she was wearing it. And I said, okay, I'm coming to you. And immediately I had her son, who was only 10 when he passed away. And I was giving her the information. I said he was in an accident, a car accident, and I gave her all the details of all of that. And she was saying, yeah, yeah, that's right. But for me, it felt like this isn't getting, like, she's not getting this, or I didn't feel like it was touching her soul. And I like to know that what you're getting is touching your soul. This means something. And particularly with it being her son and a child.
Yeah.
So anyway, I persevered through it, and she was yes to everything. Yes, that's right, that's right, that's right. And so I had to finish because I was at an event, and I said to her, well, I hope that's helped you. And as I turned around to take a sip of water, I said to the little boy, you're going to have to tell me your name. Please tell me your name, because I just knew that mother needed that. That was the bit that she was looking for. And immediately he told me his name was Kai. And I turned around and I said, I need to come back to you for a moment. His name was Kai. And she just burst into tears, and she said that was his name. And I spoke to her afterwards, and she said, you didn't say anything wrong. Everything you gave me was correct. But I, in my mind, was saying to him, well, if you're there, I need to know it's you. And she had that kind of request in her mind. And so I'm glad I got it, because sometimes you're not going to get that. You're just not going to get that, just because you ask doesn't mean you're going to be able to receive the information. But that impacted that woman so much. And on the way home, I was speaking to Spirit, as I always do after events or readings. And I was just so elated that little boy managed to come through like that and give her what she needed to start the healing journey, which is what it's all about. But there's been many, many readings. I remember just quickly another man, a woman that came to see me with her husband, and it was for a private reading. And as they came in, I said, oh, you both coming in? And he was very grumpy and, yeah, I'm coming in, like she was pulling him in. So he sat in the corner and she sat in front of me, and immediately I felt his dad. And I said, your dad's in the spirit world? And he went, yeah. And he was so skeptical and he was so guarded. I gave his father's name, I told him things, and he was like, yeah. And so there was 2 pieces of information that he couldn't verify, and it was as if that was the glory for him, because he was like, no, that's wrong, you didn't get that right. And it was, one of them was, he's shown me a ship's steering wheel statue thing. And he was like, nope, nothing to do with my dad. He didn't have anything to do with the Navy. He didn't. And I said, okay, but I'm telling you that this is here, and that's all I can tell you. But if it's not right, that's okay. And the other thing was, I said, your mother lit a candle for him in Italy in a church. And he went, my mum's not been to Italy. She's never been to Italy. And I said, okay, that's fine. So off they went. I got a phone call a few days later from him. And he said, I needed to speak to you. I went home and spoke to my mum, and she went up in the loft and she brought down a ship's steering wheel clock that my father gave to her many years ago as a gift, and she didn't like it, and she just put it in the loft. And the other thing was, she did go to Italy on a cruise. I remember her going on the cruise, but I didn't know where they went, and she did light a candle for him. So I said, that's amazing. That's amazing that you found that. And he went, how did you get that information? And I said, because your father gave me the information. And he went, I don't believe that, but I don't know how you know that. So we put the phone down, and he called me about 2 weeks later again, and he said, I can't get this out of my mind. Was my dad really there? And I said, of course he was. I said, but it's a personal thing for you. You have to believe it. I can't make you believe that. And I think as a medium, you've got to say to people, I can't persuade you. I'm not here to persuade you. I'm not here to tell you you must believe this, but hopefully I'll give you enough evidence that something resonates and something makes sense.
And it's so interesting that something as evidential as that, someone can have their guard so far up that you reach, I mean, it's good. I always agree, look for a natural explanation before jumping to quote unquote supernatural, which I hate the term, but always do that. And some people take that to such an extreme that they're looking for, well, maybe she called my mum up and spoke to her before the reading, because that's the only logical explanation that could possibly account for that. And yet still reject, well, maybe there's more to the world than I think there is.
Mediums, genuine mediums, are not there to trick anyone. Genuine mediums will do their work to the best of their ability on that day that they can do. And that's why real mediums won't guarantee things. They'll say, I'll do my best for you, and I really will try my very best to make that connection work. We're going to get things wrong. I say to my clients all the time, if it's no, say no. I don't mind if I'm wrong. It's not about me. It's about me trying my best to get the right information and the evidential information. Now, if I say something wrong or something that doesn't make sense, that's okay too. You've got to understand that it's not 100% foolproof. There's going to be things that go wrong. But if the medium's genuine enough to say that and own that and take account for that, then that says a lot about that person as a person, let alone a medium. And I think that's what people have to remember, because I've done, when I used to do house visits years ago, I remember going into a girl's house and she booked in her first name. And I said, oh, sorry, I was late, Louise. I got held up in traffic. And she kind of looked at me like, okay. And I thought, I don't know what, she's looking at me strangely. Called her Louise another couple of times. And then I realised her name was Tracy. And I said, oh, I am so sorry. I said, I've been calling you Louise. And I realised now I've written down Tracy. And I said, but Louise is your sister, right? And her sister was in the spirit world and her name was Louise. So obviously I'd already been picking up on that, but not even realising in the rush to get there and going in. So then a few other things came out, and she said to me after it, I took my wedding rings off. I took the pictures off the wall so that you couldn't see pictures on the wall. And we had a laugh about it. And I said, I understand why. You know, of course, you've got this person coming to your house saying they're going to read for you. But genuine mediums aren't there to trick anyone. We will be the first to say, you know, I got that wrong, or that's right. Or even if you say, no, I can't take that, like that gentleman did. And I was determined. I was like, no, that is there, but I don't know where it is. But that's okay. If you don't ever find it, I can only give you what I give, because we will know as mediums what's right and what's wrong and what feels a little bit off or doesn't.
Mm. Do you have any problem ever doing a show with many people? Because one thing that is often criticised is many people will say, you know, well, I have this older gentleman who, you know, this and this, and many hands will go up because the information links to so many people, especially when it's a very general thing like that. How do you, I suppose, hone into one person and continue with that? You know,
it is. You're right. If you're going to stand up there in front of an audience and give general information, like the information that everybody could take, you know, of a certain generation or a certain illness, or, you know, because we all have all of these things in common, then you're going to get a lot of hands going up. The way that I work for events is I know my area that I'm going. So I might not go directly to the person at certain points. Sometimes I do. But usually, let's say there's an audience of 100 people there, I will know I'm coming over here in these 3 rows. This is where I'm coming. The spirit world will take me there. The person that I'm communicating with will pull my energy in that direction. So even if somebody on the other side of the room puts their hand up and says, I can take all that too, because it makes sense to me too, because often in the first stages, it will make sense to more than one. I know that I'm not there. I know that I'm here. I know it's this person's father or mother or whoever it is in that area. And likewise, there's times where you give the information, nobody puts their hand up because it is specific information. Nobody puts their hand up, or they feel like it's not for them. And on one occasion, I recall very vividly, there was about 150 people in the room, and I had given this information about a girl who had passed in a car accident. And I gave loads of information. Her best friend didn't pass, she did, and nobody put their hand up. And I kept working and persevering. I said, she's here for someone. Then she gave me the name Charlotte. And a woman right at the back of the room put her hand up, and she said, I understand all that, but I don't know the girl. But it was my ex-husband's ex-business partner's daughter. So everybody at that point laughed and went, oh my goodness. And I said, well, I don't know either why this is coming, but I have to give you the messages. And the message was to tell the best friend that it wasn't her fault. And it also said she's lost a baby in that time. The best friend's lost a baby, and she has to know that it's all going to be okay. And the name David came in for the child, and there will be another baby. And that all came in. Anyway, the woman didn't know what to do with it. She said, I don't even know who to get in touch with. She said, if I'm being honest with you, I don't think I can pass this on. I said, that's okay. I trust spirit. There's a reason that you're here. So anyway, about 3 months later, I got an email from this woman who said, you don't know me. I've never met you. She was from England. And she said, there was an event, and she described it all. And this person took the message. It was my daughter that was the best friend, and she had just lost her baby full term, stillborn child. They named him David, and she was basically suicidal at that point. Then we got this message that it's okay, that David's okay, that the friend Charlotte was okay, all of the above. And now she's pregnant again. And we can't thank you enough. Now, I had nothing to do with that. That was all to do with spirit. It was nothing to do with me. It wasn't about me needing thanks. But it amazed me how the spirit world work. And I think that's the basis of my work, is knowing the magic of the spirit world and what they can do. And if you see genuine mediumship like that, now lots of people could have walked away that night and said, well, that woman didn't have a clue and she didn't know, and that was probably wrong information, but they don't see the email. So as a medium, you've got to know that what you're doing is genuine in that moment. If you truly feel that, and whatever else happens or whatever people make of that, then there's nothing you can do to control that.
Indeed. And coming back to, as you say, many people walking off without that context, many people have the complaint, I suppose, that why, if spirit have all this information and are capable of really anything, then why can't they just, shotgun correct information to you, tell you, right, you need to go to this person, his name's David, he's this, he's that, his middle name's this, etc. Why send you to a certain area with some very vague that makes the person have to think, is that me, is it not? Why not just give certain information?
I agree. And every medium would love that. Every medium would love that. And when you go to a certain area, so when I'm working, if I go to a certain area, the information won't be vague, it won't be general, it will be very exact. It won't be, I've got a man here who's maybe in his 60s who passed, he was tired at the end, or he's got breathing difficulties. It won't be anything like that. It would typically be something like, I've got a mum here, she's looking to speak to her daughter. I know there's 3 daughters. I know it was ovarian cancer that she passed with. I know that she had 2 remissions. I know that. So it'll be quite exact information rather than a general throwout. But I understand what you're asking, because we question that too. Like, why can't you just come and tell me, like, I'm looking for Sandra in row number 4 and, I'm her dad. That's what we would love. And I do think there's mediums, mainly in the past that I've watched anyway, late great mediums who have been able to be very exact like that. But it really just depends on the energy of the time. There's nights where I will work and everything you get is just like literally the person's whispering everything in your ear and it's boom, 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 boom. And then there's other nights that you work and it's harder for you. You're really grappling for the information. And there isn't really a rhyme or reason to it. We'll have to remember as well that the spirit world, they don't have a voice box. They're not physical. They're having to project the information into the medium's mind, and then that goes through the medium's interpretation system and their own interpretation and frame of reference. So it's not quite as easy as just firing the information, because if they could, then we wouldn't need mediums. If they could appear in this world and say, yeah, I'm still here, then there would be no need for any of it.
In terms of life after death, in the context of life after death, there are arguments for both that mediums are genuinely in touch with deceased people who are given these information, but there are also the theories that the medium is in fact reading the energy of the living person, the so-called super psi theory. What's your approach or your ideas on that? I'd imagine that you think, or you believe, that you're in touch with the deceased people. What gives you the evidence, I suppose, for that?
So the evidence for that is if you're connecting with, so if I connected with you as a client, I could read your energy. I could also read anybody that's been in your energy. So let's just say, for an example, I was reading you and saying, let's say your mum was in the spirit world. I've got your mum here and she used to be a school teacher and she liked singing and blah, blah, blah. And you would be thinking, wow, that is my mum. That's describing my mum exactly. Now, I could still be getting that information from you because your mum was in your life. So that's a psychic reading at that point still. The only way that you're going to know that I'm in touch with your mum in the spirit world is if I'm bringing information about what's happened in the here and now since she crossed over. That's what proves that life goes on. So it's not memories. It's not just things that you'll have in your memory or the other people in your family will have. It's actually like And your mum's telling me that when she crossed over, you were the last one to give her a kiss on the cheek. You were the last one in the room. But she's also now showing me that since then she's seen the baby coming. You've had a baby since then, and you've just changed your job. And you were speaking to her or sitting with her cup, having a cup of tea in her mug, and sitting talking to her at the kitchen table. That's what proves that that's something that's happening now from the mum. But as the medium working, there has to be feeling with that. So when I'm connecting with you psychically, it's, for me anyway, I can't speak for other mediums, it feels static. It feels, yeah, I'm linking in with you and I'm getting the evidence, but it doesn't feel like it's alive, if that makes sense. When I'm connecting with your loved one, it's a whole different energy. Like that person's alive and they're filling the room, and it's just a very different kind of energy. So every component has to come into it to give the evidential reading.
The term energy is quite non-specific, I suppose, in these kind of areas. So if you were to try and describe what you mean when you say energy, a person's energy or a spirit's energy, how would you define that?
The quickest and easiest way, I suppose, is we all feel energy, right? So if you walk, let's say two people had an argument in a room and you were going to visit them, and when you went through the front door, they were all like, "Oh, hi, nice to see you coming in." You might pick up on the energy that something's a bit off here, something's a bit strange, so you pick up energy. Everyone does. Everyone can pick up energy. When I'm working with the spirit world, I don't ever like or agree with mediums saying, "I have a mother energy here," or "I have a father energy." That person that you're dealing with was that loved one of them. So I always say, "I've got your mum," or "I've got your dad." But the energy that I'm honing into and tuning into feels real to me. It is real to me. It feels like if I was sitting next to you, I would feel your energy, or you would feel my energy. You would know with people in your life if they're having a down day or an up day, or if something was off, or you can gauge that with your own feelings. So that's what the medium does as well, but we do it to a different level. We're really connecting with the other world halfway. So it's a different frequency. It's like tuning in a radio. You'll get two radio stations that are running at the same time, but you can't hear both at the same time. And it's kind of the same. So when I'm tuning into those in the spirit world and the energy of the spirit world, I'm raising my vibration to reach them, and they're slowing theirs down to reach me, because the spirit world is very, very fast. So energy, well, that's why we talk about energy. But as when I connect with your loved one, it's the person I'm connecting with. It's that character, that person, your mum, your dad, in that sense.
When you say you're raising your frequency, again, frequency is a term that's used a lot, which I always struggle to kind of understand exactly what that means. So I suppose, A, what do you think of as frequency? And B, when you say that you raise your frequency, is that kind of a conscious effort? And how do you do that? Or is that a automatic thing?
So when I work now, it's kind of automatic. I know that when I'm going to work, that I'm going to work. So I really don't have to think about it. But in the early days when you were developing, you did have to consciously think, right, where is this coming from? You're expanding yourself, basically. So what you're doing is you're getting in touch with your own spirit, because we all have that higher part to us that's connected to spirit. And you're getting in touch with your own spirit and going into the center of that. And then you're learning to expand that outwards, upwards, whatever way you want to put it, to meet that energy of the spirit world or the frequency of the spirit world. And it's hard to put that into words. It's hard to articulate that, which is why you hear words like energy and frequency. And it's just so that we can explain what actually happens. But it is an expansion of your higher self. That's what your mediumistic way is. I know that I have to connect to the higher part of me before I can ever connect to the spirit world. That's what mediumship is. So it's about attuning to that and learning how to use that and learning how to expand that.
So I suppose from your long experience with mediumship, what have your thoughts become on the process of death and what happens to us as beings?
So, upon our passing, obviously it's about the spirit leaving the physical body. So we all have this physical body, but when that body can't work anymore for whatever reason, through illness, through accident, through whatever way we pass, the body then becomes redundant and the spirit moves on, moves back home to the spirit world. And so when that happens, I mean, as a medium, I can feel when that's happening with someone. Like my own mother, when she was passing, I sat with her until she did pass away. And I could feel for like 3 days, she was not trying to go, but trying to kind of come to terms with the fact that she was going. And my mum was frightened to pass. My mum didn't want to go. She fought it long and hard, but she knew that she had to kind of surrender to it. Her body wasn't capable of staying. So when it was happening for her, I could feel her anxiety. I could feel her fear. And I was talking to her the whole time and saying, just go, Mum, it's fine. We are all fine. You don't need to worry about us. You're not dying. You're going to the spirit world. And I'd done all the talking, and I could feel in the final kind of moments that I could feel her soul moving. That's the only way I can describe it. I was like, oh, okay, here she goes, and I knew that she was going to go. And when she went, it was the aftermath of it, because I could feel that she filled the whole room. And I was about to say midwives. I kept saying this on that night. I kept saying, oh, I told the midwives, and I couldn't get that out of my mind. And I realised now it's only because, midwives welcome life in, they help life in. And I think that in my head, that's the way it was. But I kept saying to the nurses after she passed immediately, oh, I'm so happy that she's managed to do it. She'll know that this is real and she'll be fine. And I was elated. And the nurse sat me down and said, do you understand what's just happened? I think they were really looking at me like, she's not accepting this. I said, oh yeah. I said, oh, sorry, I'm a spiritualist, I'm a medium, I know where it's fine. And I could see them thinking, we're not sure about this. But I felt that my mum moved forward. So I know that that's what happens when we pass. And my gran used to always say, well, they've got to give the spirit time to loosen from the body. And she was a big believer in that. And likewise, when she passed away, my dad and his brothers were around her, and they said after about 10 minutes, we better close our eyes now. And my uncle leant over to close her eyes, and she shook her head. Her head moved, and they all got a fright and they all jumped and were like, oh, she obviously doesn't want to close her eyes yet. And I said, oh, well, Gran always believed that the spirit might not have quite left yet, so maybe she was taking a bit more time. So that's what happens to everybody. We leave the physical, we go into the spirit, and when we go into the spirit, we're met straight away. We know where we are. We're back home. There's no confusion. When you hear people talk about earthbound spirits and people that aren't going to cross over, and rescue circles and rescue mediums, I just really don't believe in that. We come from there. So if anybody's going to make sure that we're back home, it's going to be the spirit world. It's not going to be us humans sitting here. So when we get there, we know where we are. And yes, do we have to come to terms with the fact of the emotion of leaving our family behind? Of course, there's grief in the spirit world too. If a mother or a father or a son or whoever it might be has left this world, they are going to also feel, even if they know where they are and they're still alive, they are going to feel that physical loss. They're going to feel that their life is over in the physical. So they have to grieve as well. So it's not as clear cut as, oh, they're there now and they're happy and it's all fine. It doesn't work like that.
Well, I suppose the grief for the other people left behind on Earth, so the spirit person, the recent spirit person's own grief for those that they've left behind, I can imagine is a lot less so, because they then have the conception that they're going to definitely meet again at some point.
Yes.
So it's a temporary thing.
Yes,
but I can imagine after 80, 90 years in the physical, it's an adjustment period, which I think is also why a lot of near-death experiences are very different person to person, because it's whatever's the most comfortable experience for that person to come to terms with it.
Yeah, and there's so many near-death experiences and accounts of near-death experience, and I know that we'll have to look at it scientifically, and we'll have to look at it like with a skeptical mind, and when I first started, I was the most skeptical medium you could ever meet. Like I said to Spirit, if this is real for me, then I need to know I'm doing the job properly. I don't want to be telling people things that aren't true, and it really bothered me. I really had a standard where I'm not going to do that. And after my mum passed away, it was about 6 months, and she came back to see me. She had a visitation from her. I knew it was her straight away. I was in my bed, my eyes were closed, and I was like, all of a sudden, wow, like I could feel her. And she stood at the end of my bed. And the first thing that I said to her was, is my mediumship real? Now, by that time, I had been working as a medium for a long, long time. And it wasn't a conscious thought. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to ask, it was in a split second. And right away, of course it is, but we can't be with you all the time. And that was her answer. And when I woke up properly and came out of that, I thought, wow, what a silly question to ask when you know it's real. But that shows you how much of a skeptic I was as well. So I think that when we look at near-death experience and things, it's a very personal thing to the person. It's something that they've experienced that they can describe to someone else, but the other person hasn't lived that. So it's a matter of, do they believe that?
Indeed.
But there's a thread through all of these experiences that is much the same, of how they felt. And they felt like everything was magnified and intense. And it wasn't like this world. This world's very grey and dull and, static compared to the spirit world. So there's too many stories, there's too many accounts of that, I feel, to not believe it.
As it is with mediums as well, they'll always come back and say, from their words, 100% certainty, I know that it was real. At least 95% of those that come back. And we say, yeah, but it could have been this, it could have been that. No, it was real. There's no doubt in my mind, and I'm no longer afraid of death. And I think, as you say, I know, for example, I didn't, but I know that last night I dreamt about a flying tennis ball and riding it across Mars. I know that I dreamed that. How can I prove that to anyone else? Because it's subjective.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine it's the same kind of knowledge as that is equally as unprovable as anything else.
That's it. And you've kind of got to be comfortable with that. Like, there was lots of people that said to me in the beginning, medium, right? Okay. And still, I'll still get that from people. Oh, you're a medium. Like, that's weird. But you've got to be comfortable with what you do, and you've got to know what you do is genuine, and not in a delusional way, because there are people out there that believe they're doing something that they're not, and it's not factual and it's not evidential. But I think that, like, there was one, astral travel, I used to do that quite a lot as well, and still do. Didn't ask for it, didn't know what it was. I was frightened of it when it first started happening, but then I learned about it and it was fine. And I would say things like to my son, and I remember waking up one morning and getting up and making a cup of coffee and saying, I was in Alaska last night. And he's like, oh, okay, Mum. And I was like, I was. And I described things there that I don't know anything about Alaska. If you show me a map, I don't even know really on a map where it is. But I knew I was in Alaska, and I told him things that I wouldn't know. I gave a few words that I would never have heard of and things. And we looked it up, and it was fact from that area of Alaska. So to anybody else, that sounds crazy. Like, I'm not going to go out in the street and tell someone that, but I'm able to tell the people that are around me that I trust, because they know, oh, that's Mum, that's what she's doing, kind of thing. But that was a very real experience for me. And you can't, and it happened again with my mum. I remember going into my mum's house when she was still here, still in this world, and I was in her kitchen. And she was sleeping, and I could hear her breathing, and I had a look around her kitchen. And so in the morning I phoned her and said, I was in your kitchen last night. And she went, don't be so ridiculous. My mum was a skeptic all the time, and she would, don't be so ridiculous. I said, Mum, I heard you sleeping, I heard your breathing patterns, and I know that you have got a purple bag on your kitchen table, and the vase of flowers, which is never there, it's in the living room, you've left it on the kitchen table last night. And she said, how did you know that? And I said, because I was in your kitchen last night. And so again, it has to be evidential to some people, but I knew. And so I think for anybody listening, that if you have a near-death experience, or you have an experience with mediumship or with spirit or something that you feel, believe it, trust it, and believe it.
And last question, I suppose, touch wood, I haven't lost anybody that I was particularly close to, except for my two dogs. Have you had any experiences communicating with pets in the afterlife? And what is your conception of what happens to pets? Or not just pets, but animals after death? So
animals go to the same place as we do. So your dogs will be in the spirit world the same as your family will when they go, or whatever, or when you go. And I do get dogs, cats, pets coming in, but they don't come in and communicate the same way as a human being would have communicated. But I will feel them. I will say, well, numerous times it's happened, oh, there's a dog here. The dog, you've just lost your dog. The dog's coming and sitting beside me, and then maybe describe what happened with the dog, and describe maybe something that they've still got connected to the dog, or something they were saying, or a dog's name. All of that can come into it, but they don't communicate in the same way a father would, because they didn't communicate like that when they were here. So I will pick up on it. And again, I have heard mediums saying, oh, they can communicate with animals and talk to them like they would talk to. That's a grey area for me. I just know what I feel when I work with spirit, and I can feel the animal, I can sense the animal and give information about the animal, but it wouldn't be in the same way that, a loved one would communicate.
Interesting. It's interesting that would be the case, because from what I understand, we're all part of the same, we're kind of separations of one thing, consciousness or soul or spirit, whatever term you want to use. So it's interesting that they wouldn't communicate in the same way, since they consist of the same energy.
They communicate, the mind-to-mind communication is there and the projection is there. But if you think about it like this, if a dog is there, a dog's not got, the dog's memories are going to be, we went to the park, we went to the beach, right? The dog's memories are not going to be like a mother's memories, or what a mother needed to say, or any of that. A dog's not going to come in and say, oh, your dog's seen that you've signed up for a new college course yesterday. That's not going to be that. So that's what I mean about not the same communication, but that doesn't mean that they're not using communication, because when I feel the animal, if it's a dog or a cat or whatever it might be, I will still feel the energy of that the same way, but the communication's not going to be the same in that sense.
So although we're all part of the same thing, with allegedly, I don't know how true, but allegedly perfect memory and perfect everything, knowledge of the universe, etc., which I've heard a lot, after, I suppose, for a period at least after death, we retain the traits of the life we just lived, whether that be as a human or an animal.
Yes, absolutely. And that continues on, and I've heard, people have asked me before as well, if my dad passed away 50 years ago, will he have reincarnated? And then when I get there, will he not be there? And people worry about this because there's a lot of misinformation out there, but something like reincarnation doesn't happen like that. Reincarnation is an element of that spirit. Like you've got your spirit, and then the emanation of that spirit is you and your personality and your character and your soul's path in that lifetime. But another emanation from your spirit could be incarnated in this world at some point, but it's not you, because we live this life as us, and that's the experience we have. So when your mum comes through from spirit, she will talk about her life, not, there's another, I've reincarnated since then. It doesn't work like that. But it's a huge
because it's
subject.
not relevant to your
yeah.
And there are many reports of I don't know what the term would be, bilocation, I suppose, of one soul or one spirit living different lives, either on Earth as humans and animals, or also on different planets in the universe, in different dimensions, in whatever reality is, that all feed back into that one unity of soul, which is also a separation of a unity of a larger consciousness.
Yeah.
So it is certainly a very big subject.
And I don't know that we'll ever, I don't know that anybody really fully will ever know. As a medium, I can't say, oh, everything that I feel right in this moment is correct 100%. I can only share what I've gained from the spirit world and what my knowledge is. But I'm not, I'm not going to know all the answers. Nobody in this side of life is going to know all the answers. We're only going to know all that when we go back home. And it's the same as past lives. I get a lot of people asking me, oh, what was I in a past life? And I say, why does that matter? You've got when you talk about past lives, people think it's them that lived that life. It's not, because you're living this life. So if there's another incarnation of my spirit or part of my spirit, it wasn't as me. It was nothing to do with this incarnation. So people get hung up on that and past life regression and things. And I think sometimes that can do damage to people. There's no proof. There's no evidence to say that actually happened. If you were 5 years old and you watched something on TV and it imprinted into your mind, if you were hypnotized 40 years later, who's to say it's not that's coming out rather than an actual experience? And we don't have evidence of that. So for me, I say, look, live in the here and now, be present, live your life to the fullest that you can, be who you are. And you'll know the rest when you go back home, but we're only here for a short time. It's very temporary.
Have you ever heard of any that have passed on and what their experience is of receiving? Because there is evidence of reincarnation and past lives if you look at the University of Virginia, etc. But that's all the scholarly stuff. But there is evidence to suggest that it does happen. What do you think would be the experience of one when we leave the physical body, and would we have access to all the previous lives and maybe all the discarnate or the dissociations in other planets, other lives all throughout space and time? And what would that, because that would seem overwhelming to try and process all that for many, many, many years.
I think it's like, from my feeling on it and what I feel that I've got from spirit about that, I do feel like we would know more when we go back home, because we're returning home. So we're going to have the knowledge of everything when we're back to source. But when we live like this life, a human life in this existence that we're in at the moment, then I don't feel like we're meant to remember. And if we do remember, that's okay. Like you hear about children talking about knowing exact places and locations and what their name was, and they had a sister and this is how they died, and all. I believe in all of that, but I do believe also that it's part of their spirit that they're connected to, that they're remembering at that point. It's not them that lived that life, it's part of their spirit that lived that life. So I do think occasionally there is that remembrance, there is that link for whatever reason, and maybe, on the bigger scale, maybe there are meant to be stories like that so that we do open our minds to the fact that there's something bigger, so I think there's a reason for everything. But, and kids come out with things and a lot of times they get told, oh, it's their imagination and that, and it's not. A lot of kids are coming out with that relevant information. But I think that really we shouldn't get too worried about it, worked up about it. I think that we should all be concentrating on the here and now and what we're doing with our lives and how we are evolving our souls whilst we are here. Because really what we're supposed to be doing is living a life and learning and developing ourselves.